She was 81 years old, and her hand still shook slightly as she poured the water. Not from age, from intentionality. I was sitting across from her at a small wooden table in her kitchen in Jerusalem. It was early morning, the light had not yet fully arrived, and the room smelled of old books and something warm I could not name. She did not drink immediately. She paused. She closed her eyes. Her lips moved, barely audible, and then she drank. I had seen this before in my years of study, but something about that morning made me stop and ask her what she was doing. She looked at me the way a teacher looks at a student who has finally asked the right question. She said, "I am not just drinking water, Naomi. I am opening the day." My name is Rabbi Naomi, and I have spent 37 years inside the ancient texts of Jewish wisdom, the Talmud, the Kabbalah, the writings of the early sages, teachings passed down not in books but in kitchens and study houses, and whispered from one generation to the next. What I am going to share with you in this video is one of those teachings. It is a morning practice that has been in continuous use by certain families for over 1,000 years. It is specific, it is precise, and it is completely unknown outside the lineage. Most people wake up, drink their water, reach for their phone, and step into the day already behind, already fragmented, already leaking the one resource that everything else in their life depends on. I am going to show you exactly what they are missing and what it costs them, but you must stay with me until the very end. If you leave before I reach the final element, the practice is incomplete. An incomplete vessel cannot hold what you are asking it to hold. Before we go any further, I want you to do something. Type the words, "I am opening the day," in the comments right now. Do it before we continue. When you write those words, you are not just engaging with a video, you are making a declaration. You are signaling to yourself and to something larger that you are no longer stepping into your days unconsciously. That declaration matters. It costs you nothing and changes everything. Write it now. Let me ask you something that I want you to sit with before you answer it. How do you begin your mornings? Not the ideal version, the real one, the one that actually happens. You open your eyes, and what is the first thing your mind does? For most people, the answer is, it reaches. It reaches for the problem it went to sleep with, the bill that is sitting unopened, the business that is not growing, the conversation that went wrong, the number in the bank account that is lower than it has any right to be after all the hours you have put in. The mind reaches for the wound, and then the body follows. The water is consumed while the worry is already in motion. The day begins in lack, not because you chose it, but because no one taught you that the first 7 minutes of the morning are a portal, and that what passes through that portal determines the frequency of everything that follows. I have watched this pattern for nearly 4 decades. I have sat across from people who are brilliant, people who are disciplined, people who have read every book about abundance and manifestation and financial freedom, and the ceiling does not move. Not because they are not intelligent, not because they are not trying, but because they are treating the symptom while the root remains untouched. Budgeting applications address the physical numbers. Positive thinking addresses the surface layer of thought. Working additional hours addresses the amount of effort, but none of these reach the stratum where your financial life is actually governed. Let me tell you what the ancient teachers understood that modern financial coaching has completely bypassed. The physical world is not the origin point. It is the result point. What you experience in your bank account, in your business, in the flow or the drought of provision in your life, these are not the causes, they are reflections. The Kabbalah describes this with a principle called tzimtzum, the idea that the infinite contracts to make space for the finite. What flows into your life flows first through a spiritual aperture. That aperture has a condition. It has a posture. And the posture of that aperture is set. This is what most people do not know. It is set in the first moments of the day, before the coffee, before the phone, before the first words leave your mouth. In those first minutes, the spiritual aperture of your day is either opened with intention or it defaults to the frequency of whatever emotional weight you carried into sleep the night before. When the aperture defaults, it does not open fully. It opens only as wide as your fear. And your fear, in most cases, is not very wide at all. Think of it this way. Imagine you have a pipe that connects your home to the main water source. The pipe is sound. The source is abundant. But at the connection point, someone has placed a valve, and that valve is partially closed. Water comes through, enough to survive on, but never enough to overflow. The lack is not in the source. The lack is not in the pipe. The lack is in the valve. And the valve is your morning posture. This is not metaphor for the sake of a nice story. The sages encoded this understanding into a specific daily practice, a practice with an exact sequence, an exact declaration, and a first act that is so simple, so available, so utterly ordinary that most people will hear it and dismiss it. That dismissal is the valve staying closed. I need you to resist that impulse. I want to tell you about the morning this became undeniable for me. I was 29 years old. I had been studying for 6 years at that point, deep in the texts, surrounded by teachers, absorbing everything I could about the spiritual mechanics of the physical world. But my own financial life was a contradiction of everything I was learning. I was teaching others about the principles of abundance while my own account sat thin and still. I remember a Tuesday morning in November. The light outside my window in Tel Aviv was gray and flat. I had received a letter the day before, a rejection from the institution where I had applied to lead a new study program. It was the second rejection in 4 months. I sat at my table before sunrise with a glass of water in front of me, and I felt the familiar reach of my mind toward the fear. And then something stopped me. I had been reading the previous night from the Talmud, Tractate Berachot, the tractate that deals entirely with blessings, with the correct words and postures for each moment of the day. And I had come across a passage about Netilat Yadayim, the ritual washing of hands upon waking, and what the sages said must accompany it before anything, before water, before food, before a single word of ordinary conversation. I had read this passage dozens of times, but that Tuesday morning in November, it landed differently. I put the glass down. I did not drink it. I sat with my hands flat on the table, and I said the words the sages prescribed, not as a religious ritual, not as a performance, but as what they always were, a recalibration, an opening of the valve. I said the Modeh Ani, the ancient morning declaration of gratitude for the return of the soul, and then, only then, did I lift the glass. Nothing dramatic happened in that moment. I want to be very clear about that. The letter of rejection did not reverse. A check did not arrive. What happened was quieter than that and more significant. My mind did not reach for the wound. For the first time in months, my first conscious thought after drinking was not fear. It was something closer to readiness. Within 3 weeks, I received an unexpected message from a teacher I had met once, briefly, at a conference 2 years earlier. She had been given my name by someone I did not know she knew. She wanted to know if I would consider joining a project that ultimately became one of the most significant partnerships of my professional life. I am not telling you this was the only factor, but I am telling you that something in the frequency of my mornings had shifted, and the 3 weeks between that November morning and that message were the first 3 weeks in a long time when I had not begun each day by poisoning the well. I have since watched this pattern replicate in the lives of people I have taught. A man in his 50s came to me. He had owned a construction business for 12 years, reliable but flat. He could not seem to cross a particular income threshold, no matter what operational changes he made. We spoke for a long time about the morning, about what the first 7 minutes of his day actually looked like. He was honest. He described waking up already calculating, already behind, already in problem-solving mode before a single problem of the day had even presented itself. He was front-loading his day with scarcity. We made one change. One, he committed to the morning practice I am going to share with you, exactly as I will describe it in the exact sequence. For the first 2 weeks, he reported feeling different but seeing nothing external change. He almost stopped. This is the moment most people stop. He stayed. In the 6th week, a contract came in through a referral chain he could not trace. Someone who had heard of him through someone who had heard of him through someone else. A chain of 3 people he did not know. The contract was the largest single project of his business's 12-year history. Not a miracle, a movement. The first movement of a channel that had been partially sealed for a very long time. Now let me give you the practice. I am going to be precise because precision is not optional here. The ancient teachers did not encode these elements carelessly. Each piece has a function. Remove one piece and the architecture loses its integrity. This is a morning practice. It begins before the first water crosses your lips. That is the key that most people do not have. Not because the knowledge is hidden, but because in the modern world we have collapsed the morning into a transaction. We wake, we consume, we move. The teaching says, wake, consecrate, then receive. These are not the same sequence, and the difference between them is not symbolic. It is structural. The first element is what the tradition calls hashkamat haboker, the intentional awakening. Before you reach for your phone, before you speak to anyone, before any information from the external world enters your mind, you acknowledge the moment of waking as a gift. The Modeh Ani is the ancient instrument for this. The words in Hebrew are Modeh Ani lefanecha, melech chai v'kayam, shehechazarta bi nishmati bechemla, Rabbah emunatecha. In English, the meaning is, I offer gratitude before you, the living and eternal King, for returning my soul to me in mercy. Great is your faithfulness. You do not need to be Jewish to speak these words with sincerity. You do not need to be religious. What you need is to mean them. The function of this declaration is neurological as much as it is spiritual. You are setting the first thought of the day. You are choosing what the mind reaches for in its first conscious moment. Gratitude and fear cannot occupy the same aperture simultaneously. When you open with gratitude, specific, spoken, intentional gratitude, you are closing the valve of lack before it defaults open. The second element is the washing, netilat yadayim, the pouring of water over the hands 3 times, alternating right and left, right hand first. This is not casual rinsing. This is a ritual act, and the ritual nature of it is the point. You are drawing a boundary between the state of sleep, which the sages understood as a partial departure of the conscious soul, and the state of active waking. You are marking the transition. The physicality of water on the hands is a signal to the body that the boundary has been crossed. You are saying, what belonged to the night stays with the night. I enter this day clean. The vessel is reset. If you have been waking up and carrying yesterday's unresolved weight directly into today without any transition point, and most people do, then this act is the missing threshold. It takes 30 seconds. It changes the posture of the entire day. The third element is the specific blessing over water before you drink. In the tradition, this is called the bracha, the blessing, the activation. Before water, before food, before anything is received, the blessing is spoken. Over water, the ancient words are, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, shehakol nihiyeh bidvaro. Blessed are you, the Eternal, our God, Sovereign of the universe, through whose word all things come to be. This is not religion, this is physics. The ancient teachers understood that reception without acknowledgement is incomplete. When you receive without acknowledgement, when you consume without recognizing the source, you are operating as a closed circuit. Provision flows in, but the channel does not widen because you have not signaled that you know where it comes from. The bracha before water is a signal. It says, I know this came from somewhere. I know I am not self-sufficient. I know I am part of a larger system of provision. That posture, that specific posture of acknowledged dependence, is the posture in which channels open. The fourth element is the silence that follows. This is the one most people will resist. After the declaration, after the washing, after the blessing and the first water, the ancient practice calls for 7 minutes of silence before ordinary speech begins. No phone, no news, no conversation about the schedule or the problem or the plan. 7 minutes in which the aperture that you have just opened has room to settle into the frequency you have set. Most people in the modern world treat silence as the absence of productivity. The sages treated it as the most productive thing you could do. 7 minutes of held stillness after the morning sequence is how you allow the spiritual posture you have set to become the foundation of the physical day, rather than a nice moment immediately overwritten by noise. The complete sequence then is this: wake and speak the Modeh Ani before touching your phone or speaking to anyone. Wash the hands 3 times, alternating right and left, with water poured deliberately, not running water from a tap, but water poured from a vessel, from a cup, by your own hand. Speak the bracha over water with full attention on the words. Drink. Then sit in 7 minutes of silence, not half silence, not silence while scrolling, true, held, intentional quiet. Begin this tomorrow morning, not next week, tomorrow. What you are looking for in the first days is not a windfall. You are not looking for dramatic external change. You are looking for signs of life in the channel. You might notice that your mind is quieter at the start of the workday than it has been in months. You might have a sudden moment of clarity about a situation that has been circling you without resolution. You might receive an unexpected call or message from someone who represents a direction you had been wondering about. You might find that a conversation you had been dreading goes better than any version of it you had rehearsed in your mind. These are the first fruits. They are small, they are real, and they compound. I have observed this across hundreds of people over 37 years. What tends to follow a sustained morning practice like this, maintained with precision across 30 days, is not a single event, but a shift in the texture of what arrives. The quality of what finds you begins to change. Now I want to be honest with you about something the video cannot give you, and it would be dishonest of me to pretend otherwise. What I have shared today is one pillar of a much larger architecture. The morning practice is the gate, but the gate leads to a courtyard, and the courtyard has its own structure. In my complete teaching, the full program I developed across 2 decades of working with individuals and families, this morning practice is embedded within a 12-week framework that covers the evening closing practice that mirrors the morning opening, the specific language patterns that either widen or narrow the channel throughout the day, the weekly Shabbat reset that the sages considered non-negotiable for financial flow, and the deeper teaching on the four worlds, the Kabbalistic framework that explains which layer of reality your financial life is actually governed from. One brick is real. You can feel it. You can stand on it. But one brick is not a house. If you are ready to build the house, the link is in the description. Everything you need to take the next step is there. Before you go, I need to prepare you for something. Because if I do not tell you this and it happens, you may conclude that the practice has failed, when in fact it is working exactly as it should. In the 48 to 72 hours after you begin this practice with genuine intentionality, a test will arrive. It does not always arrive through the obvious door. It might come as a bill that feels heavier than usual, a piece of news that provokes the familiar anxiety, a conversation that goes wrong at exactly the moment you thought things were beginning to shift, a small financial setback that makes you want to say out loud, "This is not working." Do not speak those words. The ancient teachers describe this test as the contraction that precedes the expansion. The Kabbalah calls it the tzimtzum before the hitpashtut, the narrowing before the spreading. It is not a sign of failure. It is a sign of movement. The spiritual vessel is being tested for integrity before it is filled. This is where almost everyone quits. The ones who do not quit, the ones who hold the posture of certainty, even when the external signs seem to contradict it. These are the ones I have watched break through what had felt like a permanent ceiling. Hold the posture. Do not speak death over your own breakthrough. Stay in the practice. Trust the sequence. What you received in this video today is not information. Information is available everywhere. What you received is a transmission, a piece of an ancient technology that has sustained families through exile, through economic collapse, through conditions that should have broken them and did not. You are now a carrier of that knowledge. What you do with it determines what it does for you. Type, "I am opening the day" in the comments if you wrote it at the beginning and you mean it more now than you did then. I read every comment. I am looking for the people who take action, because those are the people I want to speak to directly. If you are not yet subscribed, press the button now and turn on the notification bell. Next week, I am going to reveal the evening practice that closes the day the way the morning practice opens it, and what happens in the body and in the financial channel when these two practices are held together. Based on where you are right now, you will not want to be without that piece. If this teaching reached something real in you today, if something in you recognized what I said as something you already knew but had forgotten, press the like button. It tells this platform that this wisdom matters, and it places it in front of someone who is quietly looking for exactly what you just found. May your mornings be portals, and your days be filled with the overflow you were always meant to carry. May the words you speak be seeds, and the silence you hold be the soil in which they take root. May the channel of your life be wide and clean and flowing. Go well. Shalom.